Municipal Water Utility Commission. Please let the roll reflect all the members are still in attendance from the last meeting. And that brings us to meeting minutes from February 14th. Is there a motion to approve the minutes? Motion
Second.
and a second. Any comments or corrections? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor of the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Minutes are approved. That brings us to discussion item, consideration of an amendment to the Mequon Municipal Water Utilities Connection Policy related to reimbursement for Mequon water utility costs. Director Lundin is going to take this one, I presume.
I will. I apologize in advance. This is a partner or a companion text amendment to the sanitary ordinance that's on the Common Council agenda for first reading tonight. We originally intended to have that discussed at the Sewer Utility District Commission meeting that you just otherwise had, but we'll switch around and do clean water before dirty water instead, since from a policy standpoint, they're similar. It's just the different utility. What we are before you tonight requesting is an amendment to the Mequon Municipal Water Utilities Water Connection Policy as it relates to reimbursement. There are projects that are billed and contribute by developers that may require either upsizing of main to meet the ultimate requirements of the system or other improvements, loop connections, things like that, that would be cost advantageous to the utility to leverage the developer to otherwise do. We've done this for public improvements in the past, for example, in the town center. This just would specifically relate to how the utility would reimburse, since it's an enterprise fund and completely segregated from the city. The sewer ordinance actually already established how reimbursement would take place, but among other requirements, required that the developer would pay the city, and then the city would take the project and bid it and use the developer's money to otherwise build the project. And while that certainly meets the financial policies as it relates to making sure that we're being cost efficient and good fiscal stewards of the taxpayer dollars, it can add both time and actually expense to the project, and in the end, not necessarily be that cost effective for the taxpayers, or in this case, the ratepayers for the water utility. So on the sewer side, we were asking for the ordinance to be amended to include an additional reimbursement policy that would allow the project to still be bid, so that we're ensuring that we have that publication and statutory requirement, but to leverage the developer's project to otherwise complete the project and then set the utility requirements for reimbursement. From our perspective, it just adds one more tool to the toolbox, so to speak, and is more flexible than the language that previously appeared. The exception, of course, for water was we never had any language. So we're otherwise mimicking that was established for the sewer utility and requesting approval.
Thank you. Any questions from the commission? Commissioner Meyer.
Shouldn't there be some language included with this that has the basic of the calculations that we will use for the difference, that the city will pay that portion of that for the upgrade in the, let's say like the upgrading the piping that we need, higher size, the difference of the connection in that? It's something that we're aware of how that works, and then also developer works. Now that may be in the sewer. I didn't cross-check inside of that, and there may be a sidebar thing, but I think there should be some kind of language inside there that kind of explains out what the guidelines are going to be for the developer and for us.
We defaulted to the standard difference of the cost shall be made by the city engineer, which is language that appears in many locations, with the intent that that would be defined as a part of the development agreement, with the exception of the example for like upsizing of pipe. What we require is for it to be bid both ways. So it would be bid, for example, if the development is required to have a 10-inch diameter pipe, that it would be bid that way, and if the utility required a 16-inch, that it would be bid that way, and then it would be the cost differential between those two that would otherwise stand for reimbursement.
And I agree that's the way it should be done, but is there someplace inside of that should be explained out?
I think
Instead
we
of
were
just reverting
concerned
back to
about
something
having a
else.
one size fits all and then having the first one that requested, which will be because Swan Ridge Development is coming forward, that would then request an exception to the rule. So we were otherwise leaving it to be a part of the development agreement in terms of how it would otherwise be defined.
I guess I can understand that. I guess my feeling on it that there should be some kind of, at least a basic understanding what the evaluations are, instead of it being individually for each one of the developers that comes forward. So we can, if we wanted to take a look at the development agreement inside there, that we can have a clarity and know this is what we based it on beforehand.
As mentioned, I do think the pipe upsizing is easy enough to address, and we could otherwise modify the language to be the example that I otherwise just shared about bidding it both ways and then using the cost differential. It'll just be complicated by things like that Swan Ridge development that has a meter pit that is likely the only development that we will ever do that will leverage a developer for a meter pit. So I'm not sure we want to establish a policy for an item that we only anticipate having one of. So we can address the upsizing of the pipe, which will likely be the most common thing that we would otherwise see. And I mean, we can always amend the policy in the future if we find that there's a recurring theme to other reimbursement aspects.
I was just, thinking also the fact of that, when we come in and we do some of those projects, or somebody does the projects, there's unforeseen circumstances that come up. And there may be some unforeseen circumstances that come up because of the fact we're using a larger pipe for some reason. I'm wondering if that reflects into this at all, to having some kind of guidelines inside there for it. But if you feel comfortable with the fact that the city and the developer are fine with both of that without having any guidelines inside there really for it, I guess I am then too, but still have kind of issues with that.
So to clarify, we're essentially asking the project to be bid with the minimum requirement for the development and then the utilities requirement for other considerations like downstream flow, etc., looping back, pressure drop. So you'll get it bid both ways. So you'll get a hard number at the time that it's bid.
Yeah. Yes. So in the
that's what
case
the
of
policy's
upsizing
saying.
the pipe, as an example, if the development was required to have a 10-inch and the utility requires a 16-inch for the ultimate service, the only thing that would be designed would be the 16-inch. We'd have it otherwise done, but it would be bid both ways with both the 10-inch and the 16-inch, so we could get the price differential to ultimately determine what the utilities cost contribution would otherwise be. Luckily, because we're talking about water main, I don't have to talk about depth or anything like that. That comes into play with sewer, where we may otherwise require that the main be installed deeper than what is required just for the development alone, but that doesn't apply to water.
As long as they're getting two of them, then I don't have any issues, so we can have a clear-cut difference on it.
Any other questions or comments from the commission?
If you're otherwise going to consider approval, could I ask permission for it to be approved with a city attorney approving language that otherwise memorializes that in the connection policy?
That's an amendment.
Well, I'm not allowed to make a motion, but
would-
someone could make a motion that Brian's got it.
The suggested motion, since we don't have one yet, I don't think, would be to approve with the addition or modification to reflect the changes that were discussed by Commissioner Mayor, subject to review and approval by the city attorney.
I'd make that motion
I think I'll second that one.
with those really good words.
Well done, city attorney. Thank you. So there's a motion and a second on the table. Any further discussion? Good feedback. Thank you. If not, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that goes on to the council. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. We are now